So we're going to get started with the next afternoon session on supporting domain of one's own, which is kind of a mammoth topic. This is a mammoth project, a mammoth initiative that we bring to schools. And so, talking about it for 1 hour, I know that I'm not going to cover everything, but I want to give you guys strategies and troubleshooting techniques to approach an array of issues. And then hopefully over the course of the next couple of hours and into tomorrow, we can answer some more specific questions that you've come across. But starting today, I want to start with approaching a support ticket. And before I get into this, I'll go ahead and note, I think you guys are all familiar by this point with the workshop.reclaimhosting.com link that has all of the content for everything related to this workshop. But also, if you go to /documentation, we've been documenting everything that we're talking about today and tomorrow, and we're continuing to add to it. So if you notice something that's not on there, write it on the feature request wall or email us and let us know, hey, this should be documented. I'm not sure how to do this, because we want to make this a very valuable resource for you guys. But under the supporting domain of one's own category, there's an article that I've written called Approaching a Support Ticket. And obviously, as I just said, every ticket is going to be different. No two errors look the same. No two circumstances or scenarios are the same. And so troubleshooting can be challenging sometimes. So hopefully these tips will help. First things first, just to make your life easier as you're supporting domain of one's own, I recommend putting a couple links in your bookmark tab to help you out. One is on clearing your browser cache. Another one's on flushing your DNS. And I will get into that in a little bit. And then also having links to your different platform tools. So WHM, WHMCS, and WordPress. You will be constantly linking to all of that for everyone. And so having those helpful links right there is really helpful. So I link to browser cache and flush DNS multiple times a day, answering support tickets. But jumping down into things to check for when you get new tickets that come in is, first things first, you want to make sure that the user's IP address isn't blocked on the server. So there are two different places that the IP address could be blocked. So for instance, if a student is trying to connect to using their FTP credentials and they've got the wrong credentials and they're not creating a proper connection, let's see if this will load here. Their IP address will get pinged on the server and blocked. And so even if they do come back with those right credentials, they still won't be able to connect. So I can show you where that is here. If we go in WHM, you're going to want to search for something called config security. Okay, it's up here right here. So it says config security or config server security and firewall. And if we ever wanted to unblock an IP address, gosh, things are loading super slow. We would come down into a section called Quick Allow and Quick Unblock. Huge lag, I can't even. It's called, so if you come up here and you search security, config server, any of that, it's this config server, security, and firewall. And again, everything that I'm talking about today has already been documented, so don't feel like you need to take detailed notes because this is documented. But you would put that IP address in this green box here and the blue box there, the quick allow and quick ignore. And that basically says, hey, this IP address is good, let it go through, okay? A great place to send folks who don't know how to find their IP address is a place called ip4.me, okay? And I'm searching that now, and you can see right here that my IP address is this 98.175.166.48. And so that's what the user could then send you, and you could check it in WHM. So that's a great first step when troubleshooting, is just making sure that the user is actually able to access the content on the server to begin with. Okay, let me come back here. A next rule of thumb for looking at troubleshooting support tickets is making sure that the user does not have DNS resolution issues, browser cache issues, or network cache issues. And I can get a little more into DNS resolution in a minute, but for instance, kind of like Tim was talking a second ago about if a user doesn't verify their email address in time and then their account goes offline, right? When their account goes offline, it's actually their website is being pointed to the registrar. So it's pointed away from the servers, and that's a DNS change, right? But then let's say they check their email address, they approve, everything comes back, but maybe they're still not able to see their site online. This could be a DNS issue because DNS records have changed back, and that takes time, but also they may need to clear their browser cache, okay? Another great example for a browser cache issue is if maybe the student signs up for an account, loads the domain, and sees that pretty splash page that has your school logo on it, and then they go and install WordPress, and then go back to their domain, and they still see the splash page. And they say, well, I just installed WordPress. Where is that? We get those tickets all the time. The student needs to clear their browser cache. The WordPress install is there. It's cached, okay? And same with network. When you're migrating content, sometimes you're not seeing that right away. It could be a cache at the network level. So flushing your DNS at the network level can be really helpful for that as well. So all of these links are right there, and they go to specific places that tell you how to clear your browser cache, clear your DNS, and all of that. So I just have that linked there for your reference. The third thing to check if you don't know how to solve a ticket would be to check the error log. Sometimes, especially in WordPress, if a student installs a theme and then they go and install a plugin that doesn't really like that theme, they'll conflict and the site will break. And so the student will come to us and say, listen, I just installed a Dropbox plugin on my Omeka and it's not liking, and my site went down. What's going on? So one of the things we check is the error log, because that can give us a little information as to what's going on. So if I pull up this article, gosh, hopefully it'll load. I'm not sure if it's my computer or, there we go. So yeah, you'll see if you go to the domain, sometimes it'll look like this, where it just says, gosh, the page isn't working, and you see this HTTP error 500. And that's about all you get. So it's very generic. It could mean a lot of things. And right. My site's not working. Yeah, and so that's a great point. Again, Tim said we live in a Twitter world, and that's very true with our support tickets. They're less than 160 characters. So, sometimes we have to get what we can out of the student, but also do our own research. So handling errors like HTTP error 500, a great first place to start is going and looking through the error log. So I'm actually in my own cPanel right now. And once that loads here, you're going to want to go to the file manager. Okay, that's kind of where that's where you can kind of look under the hood of cPanel and see what's going on with the site. So file manager is under the the files section in your cPanel. And if this is a new student and all they've done is install WordPress, it's not going to look as filled as this. So I'm kind of working in my own cPanel currently, but I'm going to go in my WordPress demo site. Okay, so you can see here. No, you can't see there. Let's see if I can make it bigger. If I scroll down here, we've got this WordPress demo directory, okay? And so you can see I've installed WordPress. I've got WP admin, WP content, WP includes. That's the chunk of my WordPress files. You've got a couple other single files here, but right here we've got this error log, okay? And I'm not going to open it because it's going to take a minute. Oh, I've actually already opened it and prepared. So this is what an error log might look like. And again, it's a little intimidating because you've got all these lines of jargony words and symbols that don't make sense sometimes. But if you read through them, you can kind of piece together something that may be going on. Okay, so to take this example from November 2nd, 2017, they always start with a timestamp, which again is really helpful because if a user comes and says, my site broke this morning, you can kind of find the error that associates with that. And it looks like we've got a syntax error, an unexpected little less than sign expected at the end of the file, and then it gives a directory here. So we've got this WP demo, WordPress content themes, Edge theme, okay? So the error here is in the Edge theme, okay? So that goes back to this confliction with themes and plugins. So let's say that the site broke because of this Edge theme. Maybe WordPress updated and the theme wasn't ready for it, okay? So the site broke. If I wanted to turn off this theme, I can, okay? A lot of times these HTTP errors will not allow the student to access their dashboard, so they can't even get in to make changes. And when that happens, we can actually turn that theme off. So if I'm in WP demo here, if I go to WP content, where that error directed me to, WP content, going into themes, you can see I've got this Edge theme right here. Okay, and that's actually the theme that's currently on my WP demo domain. So I'm going to load that here so we can see what the site looks like before I turn off the theme. Okay, so if I wanted to uninstall this theme without actually being in the dashboard, I could just double click and rename it and then click enter. Okay, so I've just done Edge_off, but you could really type whatever you want there. Click enter. I like to do off because then it's really nice to come back to the user and say, listen, turns out there was a confliction with your Edge theme. I temporarily turned it off so you can access your dashboard. You may want to reach out to the developer. It's not our job to fix the themes. It's our job to get them back into their dashboard, right? So you may want to reach out to the developer to figure out why there's this confliction with the plugin or software update, or you may want to use another theme. Okay, but this allows them to at least get into their dashboard. Okay, so now if I were to turn off that theme, which I did, if I refresh the page, let's see if it loads, you can see the theme directory Edge does not exist. Okay, so hypothetically, that would have turned off the HTTP error 500, and that would allow the student to get back into their dashboard, which is the goal. Okay. So I'm gonna, and then again, if I wanted to rename it and turn it back on, I would just remove my edit and click enter, and it would go back to its original state. Does that make sense so far? Cool. So that is another place to check. That error log can be really helpful for helping you nail down issues. But again, let's say, we've checked the student's IP address, we've made sure that it's not a local browser cache issue, and we've checked the error log, and it turns out there's not even an error log. There's no errors on the site as far as File Manager knows. So what can we try next? The next step would be to run this FixPerms script. And I can speak for the rest of Reclaim Hosting to say that this script is something that we run multiple times a day. It sounds very technically advanced, but it's really not, okay? It's a very quick script, and I'll explain why we do this. Apache web software, gosh, what is it called? Apache web server software is installed on all of our servers, whether they're shared hosting or domain of one's own. Okay, Tim has talked briefly about Apache, mentioned it in his last talk, but Apache essentially handles all requests that come to the server, okay, and it keeps tabs on all of the domains. So when you go and access wpdemo.labrumfield.com, you're asking Apache to direct you to that site. And if for whatever reason that request can't be completed, it throws an error. So, and that might, for whatever reason, we can run this FixPerms script, and sometimes that actually clears up the error. So if a student maybe is uploading a lot of files through FTP and there's a lot of activity back and forth in FTP, it can open up the permissions, and Apache doesn't like that very much. It says, oh gosh, this site is not secure enough, for, you know, and it kind of balks a little bit, and so it'll throw an error. So running this FixPerms script can be really helpful. And there's no harm in running this, okay? So even if there's nothing wrong on the site, I can still run this and it doesn't do any damage. So it's great, it's just a fail-safe to check. And I can do this on my Mac in Terminal, but if you're using a different operating system, there are other things out there like PuTTY for Windows. So that's something that we could also explore maybe tomorrow in a hands-on workshop if you were wanting to run this in a different operating system. So I'm going to show you how to run this script on my own domain, which is, I know for a fact, my domain is on Dino Junior. So I am going to come in here and log into Dino Junior. I think I can just do Dino Junior here. Hold on, let me see. Yeah. See if it'll load. Okay, so I'm going to, where am I? I'm going to want to copy this script here. It's sh space fixperms.sh, and then you have another space, and then it's -a, and then you put the cPanel user. So this is not a script that I have memorized. Tim and maybe other folks do, but I don't feel that comfortable in Terminal. I'm going to be honest. It's something that I'm still playing around with, but I can do a few things that really do help. So I do recommend getting your feet wet and playing with this if you haven't already. So I'm going to just copy and paste that line in there. And then I'm going to go back and find my cPanel username. It'll show up in general information here. You can see in the home directory, but there's a couple places to see your cPanel username. There's also that field in the WHMCS products tab. When you have the username and password, that username is what you would want. I'm going to replace that here. So I've copied and pasted my username. Just press enter, and you can see it working through. It's going to sit here and work through all of the files in my account and just basically fix permissions, okay? And then it just says finish when it's done. It does no harm to run that script, and now I know that my site is secure, or that Apache thinks my site is secure in that way. So again, running that script is super helpful and fixes more problems than you would realize. So that's why it's on this list. And the last thing on this list that I wanted to touch on deals with htaccess files, which again is something that Apache controls. I'm not sure if you're familiar with htaccess, but there's a lot that can happen there. So we're only going to kind of skim the surface because it's just as domain of one's own administrators, it's good to at least be familiar with what htaccess is, why it's there, and what it should look like, okay? So htaccess, or Apache, essentially keeps tabs on all domains in the account, right? And handles those requests and permissions, but htaccess allows the user to set their own rules aside from Apache. So Apache might say, all of the domains on the server are going to load at labrumfield.com /index.php. Okay, so all domains will by default have this index.php on the end. And so our htaccess file says, we're going to write a rule that says, no, we want that index.php to be removed, and we just want to say labrumfield.com. Okay, so that's one of the ways that htaccess is used, but it's also a file that can be hacked. Okay, so if you see a hacked WordPress site, that htaccess file might look a lot differently. So it's important to know what it's supposed to look like. So there's a lot of reading here. You can jump into that later if you want. When should you not use htaccess? It makes more work for the server because you're telling the server, okay, we got to look at all of these rules over here on top of the rules that Apache has already set. So it does create more work. So if you're not fully comfortable adding rules to htaccess, we recommend reaching out to Reclaim support or trying to do it outside of htaccess. So for instance, all users with a cPanel can technically block IP addresses through their htaccess file. And that's super helpful if you are an experienced user and you know your site's getting hammered with an IP. You can go in a pinch and block an IP address there before you've talked to Reclaim support or whatever. So there are ways that you can do that, but obviously you can unblock IP addresses on WHM. So that's where you would want to do that instead. But for the purposes of this, I wanted to show you what an htaccess file should look like and what it should not look like. So we're going to go back into our file manager here, and htaccess is actually a hidden file. So if you come up into the settings window in your file manager and you come down here and you click Show Hidden Files, we're going to save that and let that load. And you can see our htaccess file now pops up right above error log. Okay, so I'm going to open this up. And again, I'm still in my WordPress demo file. And this is a healthy htaccess file. All I've done on this domain is installed WordPress. So let me try and make this bigger. So that's what it should look like. It'll say begin WordPress, end WordPress, okay? There's a rewrite engine on, okay? htaccess files should have that. So that's something to be aware of and look for. And you have a full few rules here. You see the rewrite rule. We're getting rid of that index.php. So there's a few things there that WordPress adds. However, if you've got a hacked site, you might see an htaccess file that looks like this. I'm going to make this a little bigger here. It'll say rewrite engine on, but then instead of having those pretty begin in WordPress, you'll see these rewrite rules to ask.com, google.com, bing.com, okay, or any other sort of phishing sites, okay? So anyone that went to the domain would then be redirected somewhere else that maybe was a little less friendly. So we have seen that instance before. And while we don't expect you by any means to fix htaccess files, being able to come to us and say, hey, it looks like something with the htaccess file is a little wonky or what have you, then that would be a huge help for us as well. So again, this is just one of those things that checking as you're answering support tickets can be helpful. Yes? The new one? Yes, that's a great question. The answer is yes. You can always fix it, but my advice is if there's issues here that have looked like they've been inserted, not by the user, chances are there are other files that have been infected as well. So we can talk more later about how to fix hacked WordPress files, because that is something that we deal with. You know, if a user has installed WordPress and never updates their plugins and you go into their dashboard and they have 28 updates available, you know, chances are they're more likely to get hacked. And so it is something we deal with. But yes, to answer your specific question, that is something that you can just erase and replace.
We can also have a situation where the htaccess file just didn't exist. It was on this WordPress site while the main site was loading, because the server would load it with index.php. When it would go to other pages, because they weren't linked properly, it couldn't figure that part of it out. So just creating one and copying and pasting default WordPress htaccess code perfectly fine fixes the site. So if it just doesn't exist or it doesn't have the right stuff, you can copy and paste the right ones. And we've seen that if they moved files from another server, and because it's a hidden file, it sometimes doesn't get added into an archive or a backup or something like that, and they were copying and pasting stuff directly, and so you may need to just go and add it. It's essentially the same thing. If you're in WordPress, if you go to settings permalinks and you hit save, it creates that htaccess file, because that's what a permalink is in WordPress. It's making prettier URLs on the server. So it's just a different name for what they're doing, is they're creating an htaccess file and adding this. That specific code is htaccess is more generalized for anybody who can rewrite rules. cPanel uses that file as well. If you create a redirect in cPanel, it's adding htaccess rules to make that redirecting happen.
And it's also worth noting that if you install WordPress on wordpress.labrumfield.com, but then install Omeka on omeka.labrumfield.com, you'll have an htaccess file for both of those. So it's not one htaccess file per account, it's per directory or per software application that you're using. And yeah, we actually have had issues with that htaccess file where if Omeka is installed in the home folder, like right in public HTML, and then you go and install WordPress in a subdirectory, the WordPress won't install properly because there's a conflicting htaccess file with Omeka. And that's a bug that they were aware of and I think have worked to fix, but that was an issue for us for a while. So htaccess, it's a little intimidating. I will be the first to admit. I don't know everything about it, but it is worth knowing a little bit, you know, being familiar with it and knowing that it's there to at least check, okay? So that's why it's on my list of things to check when you're approaching a support ticket. Mm-hmm. Yes. In every single one. Yeah, yeah, that is a nice realization for sure.
For example, if you have something installed in one folder and then you create another folder and install it underneath of it, it should trickle down some of those rules. Usually, htaccess folder, whatever. Yeah. I mean, htaccess can get weird like that because then subfolders can override rules on the parent level, and in general, each piece of software kind of does.
This brings up the question about subdirectories versus subfolders. Best practice for how we approach that.
Right.
There's the long domain issue versus subfolder. So, a better way to do one or the other in terms of, I want to install WordPress in this directory, other instance of it in directory.
Right.
Subdomain versus subfolder.
Right. I think it has a lot to do with user preference. We get that question a lot, and it has a lot to do with preference. However, if you install WordPress in /WordPress, but then you've got another install somewhere with a WordPress page at /WordPress, you do get that confliction. And so because of that, I tend to lean towards subdomains because it's just cleaner. And that's just how my brain works. But
the subdomain creates a subfolder.
It doesn't anymore. Okay. cPanel now creates subdomains at the level of the account, not within public. Okay.
Right. So that's
helpful. You have less conflicts between the different software before everything was in public for HTML.
That's good.
Yeah, you can see that here. I've got public HTML here, but then my subdomains are now outside of it. So it's, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Or is it still personal preference?
Yeah, I mean, yes, you do get, yeah.
Rather than slash, whatever.
Right. Mm-hmm.
A lot of times because of these htaccess,
Right.
because some of that stuff can trickle down and cause conflict.
We're mentioning that bug in the WordPress install for WordPress.
Okay.
That bug in multi-press install for WordPress where it doesn't create the right access bug.
Oh, we're gonna put this.
So, oh yeah.
You just said creating subfolders for why would you create a sub? What's the benefit?
Oh, right. I think the scenario there is maybe you've got a project that, you know, you could have, so you could have one WordPress install that's labrumfield.com/project, right? And that /project is a page on labrumfield.com. So it's one WordPress instance. The other scenario is you might have a WordPress install, a separate one on labrumfield.com/project. So if that's, I don't think there's any benefit to either one, except maybe, you know, that /project needs more room, more than just one page. So you may want a full WordPress instance for it. But the issue there is that you would have that WordPress, that confliction of files, because you can't have a WordPress instance on /project, but then have a page over here on /project as well. Right, right, yeah. Right, yes. Mm-hmm. And then maybe you do /spring 2018, spring, you know, 2019 or whatever.
The servers. So if a folder exists with the same name, you can create that page as many times as you want, but it's not going to show it. What's going to show is an empty folder, whatever is the actual folder on the server. So Apache wins before WordPress does. So if you got a folder by a certain, then WordPress
That's a good point.
Override that and create a page by the same name. The folder has to be, and then WordPress can take over that.
What is WordPress do?
What's that?
That's one of the rules in the htaccess file.
That's right.
Right.
Yeah.
So does WordPress error out in some way when you try to create?
It'll just sit there, but it won't load.
Okay.
Yeah. In WordPress scenario, I've got a database, I'm creating a page, all things good. It doesn't know that the server isn't handling that URL anymore. And it's not really looking at your files.
Okay, so that is an overview of the things to check when you don't know how to answer a support ticket. But if all else fails, just send a support request to support@reclaimhosting.com, and we will obviously take a look and help you out. And our process with support is documenting the steps that we take to fix, so you can hopefully learn on the spot and do it yourself next time and continue to play an active role in supporting domain of one's own. Things that help us in support tickets, obviously, first and last name of the student or user having an issue, their domain name, and email address. But if you can get those things like their IP address, a screenshot of the error that they're receiving, what they did to get that error, those things will help us, because historically or generally we'll end up asking you those questions. So that would save that conversation as well. But any questions about approaching a support ticket before we move on to some specific support examples of common stuff that we get a lot? Cool. All right. Hang in there with me. I know we are prime time nap time. Okay. So one of the issues that we get a lot, especially or specifically with WordPress, is there is a section in the WordPress dashboard. It's under settings, where a student or anyone who has that WordPress instance can go and change their domain. We don't know why WordPress has this. It doesn't do anything. It only breaks things. But it is there, and it is very misleading. So this is something that we absolutely have to talk about, because you more than likely will experience this. And I'm actually going to break my own site live and show you how to fix it, okay? So let's see here. If I'm in my cPanel, I'm going to go into my apps, get this loading. All right, and I'm going to scroll down here to my WordPress demo site, log into the dashboard. It opens. Okay. If we come to Settings General, this is where folks go. There's a section where you have this WordPress address, and then that's my domain. It says wpdemo.labrumfield.com, and then I've got another site address, wpdemo.labrumfield.com. So folks will see this, as you can imagine, and they'll say, I don't want my domain to be what it is. I want it to be called Photography Club 101, or what have you. Or I just want to be on, I'm going to call this project, not demo. I'm done with it being a demo. It's now the real deal. So I'm going to come through here and call it project, okay? I'm going to come down here and save changes. Oh no, what happened? Okay, so now I'm on if I go to my main site, it's not going to work properly. And if I go to the dashboard, it's not going to work properly either. Or this, yeah, anyway, it causes a huge confliction. You can't get in the same way. This is what my main domain looks like. So obviously the user freaks out, they put in a ticket, and you look at their domain and you say, I can't even get into their dashboard. How do we fix this? It's actually easier than you would think, and can be fixed straight from the user's own cPanel. So you don't have to access WHMCS or WHM. You just go straight in to the user cPanel, so you can switch as user, go in through WHM or WordPress or wherever. And from this search bar up here, we're going to search PHP, okay? So we have to go into the database to fix this. So if we go into the database section, we click PHP My Admin. And again, this is all documented, okay? So don't feel like you have to take notes right now. But over here, this is my list of databases. And if I'm a student who only has one subdomain and one WordPress instance, I'm only going to see 2 things up here, not this full list. So be mindful of that. And if I remember correctly, I'm pretty sure my demo site is on WP1. So I'm going to come to WP options down here. So I'll do that again, show you really quick. LA Brumfy, that's my database name, WP1. And then if I scroll down to WP options, that's what I'm going to click. That's where you want to go. And if I look over here, now I can see that project.labrumfield.com. Okay, so if you notice that maybe in WHMCS, their domain says something else, or, and then you come in here and you see that change, you can say, I bet they changed their domain. So what we have to do is change it back. Okay, so it's this first line. It says site URL. Let's see if I can make this a little bigger so you can see that there. And I'm just going to come over and click edit. There we go. That's where I made the change. So I'm just going to come in this box and click WP demo and scroll down and click go. Okay. It takes me back to where I was now. So now, I changed it in 2 places, so I have to fix it in 2 places. The first one's really easy because it's just right there at the top. The second one is a little more hidden. It's actually, if you scroll down here, and you have to go to page 2, okay? So if I scroll down about halfway, I see there it is again. It's under home, and it's this project.labrumfield.com again. So I'm going to go through and edit. And I'm going to change this part back to WP demo and click go. And that's all it is, okay? So fingers crossed that Murphy's Law doesn't happen here, but now if I reload, the site's back to normal and I can get into my dashboard, okay? So it almost gets to the point now where if you go to the main domain and you see that list of of the web content without the CSS, you can say they changed their domain, okay?
Is there an anti-change URL plugin that somebody's written?
No, we wish we could hide it. We don't know. It's there, and so we can just fix it.
Why can't you go back and work dashboard back to that same place and just change it back?
Because that dashboard isn't there. Yeah. 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 Yeah.
So I just did this.
I know when you said, I know at lunch you said that, and I was like, she changed her word.
Even my developer to know the trick you just shared. So two things. We fixed it by
Scrolling down.
backup,
Okay.
and I just
Restore to backup. Okay.
like, number two, can you show me the support page for this problem? You had it up there.
Yeah, sure.
I need to email it to them.
So it's under this supporting domain of one's own category, and it's called Fix for Changing Site URL and WordPress Dashboard. Supporting domain of one's own, yes.
Thank you.
Yes.
Well, I'm good, you would use that option.
Yes.
But that's the only place this, like I'm telling you, go and change to.
Right. Okay. So that is, yes, that is a place to do that. Yes. It's just, you can do HTTPS there, right?
You can, so like that's
That-
the one time it won't break because HTTPS is 20%.
Right.
So the server's fine.
It's just when you go in and fix the text.
Students know like, oh, I can change that.
So it may be worth adding a note that says, don't change your domain here. Because, yeah. So yes, that is a great point. You can do HTTPS there and nothing will happen. But it's just when you affect that text, it fights with what the dashboard has, or not database, excuse me. And so it does break the site there. Yes.
Was that a subdomain that you had there?
This was a subdomain, and I wanted to show that specifically because some of you guys are not using top-level domains.
So if they actually wanted to do that, you have to create a new subdomain, thing that they wanted, and then just copy the
Right. Then you would use Installatron's cloning feature.
and clone
Mhm.
the
That's what
new
we
one.
did.
Yes. And so we do have that documented as well in community. So there's two resources if you're not familiar. We have workshop.reclaimhosting.com, which has documentation articles for you guys for domain of one's own admin. But then if you go to community.reclaimhosting.com, there's a lot more documentation there for things like working through Installatron and that sort of thing. We feel good about this one?
I can fix it myself.
Yeah, it is helpful for sure. The other thing I wanted to show you quickly is a couple troubleshooting fixes. So let's say the student does not like accessing their cPanel. They think it's over the top and scary, and they just want to go straight to their WordPress dashboard and enter labrumfield.com/wpadmin and just go straight to that link, bypass cPanel altogether, but they forgot their password. Okay, so this is very easy to fix as well. Okay, if we go into My Apps, and the user can do this, or you can do it for them. But let's say we are going to reset the credentials for this domain. Obviously, this WP admin link will log me straight into that dashboard as the admin. But if the user does not want to go through their cPanel and they need that password reset, I can click on the title here and it'll give me a few more options, okay? So I've got this overview, and you've got this files and tables tab here, but the overview is what you want. And you can reset the password there, okay? So I can generate a new password and show that and copy and paste that to the student, or I can generate something that they want to use, something memorable. So, and then I would just go down here to the very bottom and click Save All. Okay, so it'll take a few minutes, but that's how you reset that password. And so it's a very easy fix, but it's just kind of hidden. So I like to show that because it is a common support request that we get. The next thing, finding your IP address, which I've already walked through. It's ip4.me. And this is actually a little GIF of our bitninja.io. Bitninja is our external firewall. So it's outside of WHM. And it's something that domain of one's own administrators do not have access to. So I like to mention this here because if you work through all of those steps of unblocking IP addresses and checking error logs, and you think they may still have a block somewhere, but you're not sure, and the config server security firewall doesn't say anything in WHM, we can actually check that IP address on our external firewall, Bitninja, and see if there's a block there. So it's always worth checking, even if you've unblocked the firewall or unblocked IP addresses on your own server. And then that last one is clearing your browser cache and network cache, as we've mentioned before. The other thing I wanted to share quickly, since we have a little time, is how to change a domain correctly. So let's say that the user breaks their domain in WordPress, that WordPress dashboard, and so you replace it, you fix it for them, but then they say, well, actually, I do want this to be project.labrumfield.com or something like that. So I'm going to show you how to change that here, but to do that, I'm actually going to do this in state U, so we can work with an actual subdomain here. So let me pull this up. And WHMCS to fix it there too. Right, I always, that is. Whoop. Okay. Let's get that loaded. That loaded too. All right, so what I'm basically doing here is I'm pulling up the user profile for in WHMCS and WHM for my account. So I'm just lauren.stateu.org. Okay, so I'm going to pull that in here too. And if you can remember, we're going into list accounts, right? And I'm going to pull that up here as well. I just searched Lauren, and there it is, okay? So now I'm set up in WHM and WHMCS. If I want to make changes to this subdomain, let's say, you know, I want to go by my middle name instead of my first name, so I'm going to go by Ashley, okay? So I have to click this little, there's a little plus box right here, okay? So I'm going to drop that down and then come down here and click Modify Account. And you can see here, this is the primary domain. There's a little field there that has my current domain in it. Okay. So I'm going to come here and change that to ashley.stateu.org. And let's hope that nobody else has ashley.stateu.org where it won't work. Do we just come through and click Save? And sometimes this can take a minute, depending on how many accounts are on the server and everything. So we'll just wait here really quick. The computer's been running kind of slow, so. Okay, well, while that's going, I will check to see if there's an Ashley.stateu. Okay, cool. So there's not an Ashley, so that should come through fine. While that's going, though, you want to make changes in one other place to record this process. Remember, WHMCS keeps a log of everything that's happening, so it's important to make this change here as well. Okay, so I'm in the Product Services tab, and I also want to make that change on the domain field here. Okay, can everybody see this? Sorry, I know it's kind of small, but you want to come through and change it here as well. And I scroll down and click Save. So this came through, it fixed. It'll come through at the top. Everything's changed. My primary domain is now ashley.stateu.org. So I can come back to list accounts. And I've also changed it here in WHMCS, right? So now if I come to list accounts and search Ashley, there's my domain. I can click cPanel and log in as that user.
Does it matter what order you do that in?
I like to do the server first, just to make sure that you don't break anything, but right, it's not actually communicating with the server. So it is important for that step. The only time in WHM, there's a few times where WHMCS directly communicates with WHM, so you don't have to, and it's running those module commands like terminate or suspend, okay? But editing the fields like that, that's something that you have to do directly within WHM. So now you can see over here, my primary domain is ashley.stateu, and if I can't remember if I have content on this domain. I think I do, but that content has now been put on ashley.stateu. Was it at the top here?
Yes.
Right. Tim might be able to speak more on that. I've never.
Underneath the, it gives you the option to cPanel user.
Okay.
Don't do that.
The reason being, like, most stuff will work okay, but like, especially if you change database name, software, because it does rely on that old name. So, you know, it's aesthetics. We get occasionally someone say, "Oh, I got a username," you know, because the default's like the first 8 characters of your name. Right. So it'll be like, "Oh, can I have, you know, Jeff is awesome. It's a cPanel username." It's like, yeah, it's gonna break all your stuff. It's just a lot of cleanup work involved, and it's not necessary. So we usually just don't check that and don't change their cPanel username. Just make it sell in that spot.
And it is then new credentials for FTP and everything, which is just another thing to relay to the student. So, did you have a question? Or, yeah, I thought you had your hand raised.
Yes, but I have a question. So I had to do this Monday. The professor said, "Oh, you realize I can't have 2 domain names." So I looked at the
Mm-hmm.
and the first one, that the step 1 is finding the server, and then there was a terminal that I didn't understand. So I said, well, let's skip that.
Okay.
I understand that I went to the step 2, and it worked fine. That's for the top.
Okay. Let me see if I can see where you're.
It's changing.
Right. Okay.
Looking for the server, it's probably applying to schools that have more than one.
Have more than one server. Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
Larger.
Yes, I know what you're talking about now, actually. It's in WHMCS. So here, this product services tab, like a great example is BYU. I think they just signed on their 7th server. So they've got a ton of accounts, right? And if you are changing a domain, the server will say BYU3. Okay, that's their 3rd server. So you have to make sure you're going into the proper WHM, because there's a WHM account for each server. Right, yes. So for schools that just have one, that you guys are on your pilot accounts or, you know, whatever, then yeah, you'll just be accessing that one WHM. But so yes, that's how you properly change a domain, okay? Let's see. Any?
WordPress sites on that, you have to change all of those.
No. Yep, that happens. Any other questions so far? Okay, well, there's one last thing I wanted to show you quickly how to do before we break. I can see eyes sort of glazing over. I know it's a lot to take in, but a question that we get a lot is, how do I change quota for this user? Okay, so our default quota account is 500 megabytes, or some, I think we set most domain of one's own schools on 1 gigabyte per account, but let's say you've got a faculty member who wants to run a bunch of stuff and they need 5 gigs of space, or, whatever. So that's actually something that you do in WHM under list accounts as well. Okay. And let's say I want to change the quota for this ashley.stateu. You can see here in the bottom corner, there's this quota. Okay. So I'm going to come out just a little bit here so you can see there's a lot going on. We can see the IP address, username, contact email address, when it was set up, and then we have this quota, all right? So if I extend this out again, I've got to change quota link there. And I would just make changes. So let's say, I wanted to give them a gig. I would just click save. And that's all it takes. Cool. So now if I go to ashley.stateu, I'll just do Ashley here. You can see their quota is now 1 gig. Can't remember if Tim showed you guys that, but that's how that's done. And that's supporting domain of one's own in a nutshell, okay? So there's a ton of articles here. You feel free to continue to read these and use them as a resource and request other articles. But in terms of strategizing, answering support tickets, and handling some of those frequently asked questions and tickets, I hope you find this helpful. Cool. So with that, let's take a small break here. Get up, stretch, and then we will talk about DNS for a little bit.